So this is the 3D printed building that we did in previous episodes. I've not actually progressed it much more than the print itself. I did run a file on the bottom to try and smooth the edges out, and it looks relatively good. In this episode, obviously, I'm going to go from this unpainted model. I'm going to work my way through the different stages, trying to show some of the techniques I'm using to turn this unpainted model into a fully painted item. So prior to painting, the first thing I always do is I prime them up with a bit of rattle can. It's Halford's carb primer. I always have a tendency to use white primer. I'm doing this in the loft, but I'm wearing a mask, and I will put I'll leave the loft so it can ventilate for 24 hours before I come back up here and do any work, and then the paint will obviously have time to dry and harden. The paint I'm using for the models is Citadel Paints. It's an acrylic based paint. I've really got into using these over the last year or so. I found that the coverage is pretty decent, the range of colours is good, and they mix well. So yeah, I quite like these paints, and I've moved away from enamels, pretty much doing most of the stuff using these paints, making blends that I need as and when. So here you can see I'm mixing up a paint colour mixed with War Fiend Grey and Krieg Khaki. I'm trying to make the greyish colour that the majority of the building is painted, or stone colour that it's coloured in. I'm then going to water it down to a few drops of water, making it a little bit more liquid, and then I'm going to give the body of the building, I think I had 3 coats in the end, but it gives it a nice grey effect. I'm now going to do the wood effect for the panelling on both on the front and the back of the building. For this I'm using dryad bark. I'm sort of using a dry brushing technique with this. I'm putting a small amount on, wiping some off on a tissue, painting it on, then wiping it down with my thumb to get that mottled effect that you've got from like the sun bleaching happening over the time. For the door, I've actually used Evil Sun's Scarlet. I've just painted this directly on, and then I'm going to use a black. I think it's a Baden black for the hinges. I've also used some of the Abaddon black for the drain pipes. For the corrugated roof above where the compressor's held, I've used some of the neat Wharfine grey. It's got a more bluish tint to it. This is supposed to be, it's like a corrugated plastic that's a little like see-through to let the sunlight through, so it's got more of a bluish tint. It's not perfect, but I think it gives a reasonable effect of the colour of the roof here. For the area of the bricked up doorway, I've used a mixture of Evil Sun Scarlet and Squid Orange. It gives a more of an orangey colour hue that I think it looks okay for the brickwork in this area. Now I'm going around picking out all the window frames using a Corax White, which is a base coat. It's quite a thick paint, but when you paint in white, it covers quite well. And as you can see from the images, it really does stand out the white quite nicely. Moving on to some of the weathering now. There's an area next to the window here that's covered in quite a lot of brown, mucky dirt of some description. So I'm going to use a dry brushing technique again. I'm going to use a mix of Dryad Bark, Abaddon Black, and Bugman's Glow. I'm just going to go over that area and just dry brush it in a little bit, making this stain for the side of the building. For the weathering on the roof of the building, I've used again the dry brushing technique using a mixture of avalanche sunset, which is a yellowish colour for the lychee and the algae that's growing on top. Dryad bark again for the dirty brown colour. I did the technique again on the top of the flat roof as well, so both buildings had similar sort of techniques used on those. And to finish the building off, I've gone round and I've used some weathering powder. I've got a dark grey weathering powder. I'm just using a sponge to applicate this to the side of all the building. It just tones the greys down a little bit and looks a bit work stained, and it just improves the overall look of the building, I think. So here's some photos of the finished building. I'm quite pleased with how it's turned out, and taking this from the concept of the photos and the drawings that Paul supplied me. In previous videos, I've shown you how to draw it up in 3D CAD, and then today's episode, I've gone around and completely shown you how to paint this up on the techniques I've used to finish the model. As you can see, at no point have I used an airbrush. I'm not one of these people that like them. I prefer to hand paint them. I've never really got on with airbrushing. But I think it's turned out a reasonably decent looking building, and I'm really pleased with how this all look on the layout. I hope you've enjoyed watching the episode, and thanks for watching.